So the model I use in my classroom is a gradual release model. That model starts with explicit direct instruction by the teacher to the students, where students are recording and they are watching what the teacher is doing and explaining. The next piece of the gradual release model would be where the students are practicing with the teacher guiding the students through the activities. For example, if the lesson was on long division, the students might have first been watching in phase one the teacher do a problem and they're simply copying. And in the second phase, where the students are practicing with the teacher, would be the teacher asking probing questions, doing think alouds as the students are doing it with the teacher. And the teacher would slowly pull back and have the students maybe do the next step by themselves, then check as the students are slowly taking more responsibility of the concept being taught. The third part of gradual release is where the students are collaboratively working together to complete the concepts being taught. Students might be given, for example, again with division, they might be given a problem to do together using their notes that they took with the teacher in phases 1 and 2. But now the students are grappling with the concept together, going through the steps. In the beginning of the unit, the teacher would want to be checking in, maybe problem by problem with the students, so that there's any misconceptions, they're taken care of and addressed right away. And then throughout the unit, this phase might give students more autonomy to continue on doing problems and checking themselves as they grapple through the concepts, because they become more familiar through the unit with it. As you're going through the unit, this phase 3 of collaboration would take more of the daily lesson time in the beginning of the unit. Phase 1 and 2 would be taking more of the time as the teacher is showing and they're practicing and the teacher's constantly checking in. And then as students become more capable of the concepts, the third phase would become longer and the activities would become more complex as you move through the unit. Where in the beginning, they might simply be doing one problem with their partner or group and the teacher checks in, and then they do another problem and the teacher checks in, and it might just be a straight division problem. And then as you go through the unit, the problems would become more complex. They might be multi-step word problems, including division, depending on the benchmarks. The students might be working at a higher level where they're analyzing errors of division problems, not just solving them, but analyzing them. They might also be using inverse operations to find a missing divisor or dividend. So the problems become more complex throughout the unit as well. And the last phase of the gradual release model is complete student autonomy in practicing the skill or the lesson, usually in an assessment at a district or school level. That would be the final phase where students are working completely on their own to demonstrate their understanding. So as we lead up to the end of the unit, students are working on that final day all by themselves in that final phase. So throughout a daily lesson, all 4 of those steps would be followed. But as the unit is unraveling, the phase 1 and 2, which might be taking the majority of the time in the beginning of that unit, becomes shorter, and then that phase 3 becomes longer as students are practicing those deeper lessons, and then finalizing with phase 4, that assessment or that student autonomy piece. If it was more of a project-based unit, it would be that project that they would be doing autonomously at the end. The strengths of this model are that students are being guided and scaffolded throughout the unit. They are not sitting in one lesson completely having teacher lecture. There is that practice piece. Even if the collaboration piece in the first day is short, there is collaboration. And there can also be collaboration in phase 2. Not where students are working completely independently together, but the teacher can have students turn and talk. What do you think? Have those kind of probing questions. Even if it's just to talk to their shoulder partner about what the next step should be as the teacher is practicing still with the students. You don't want students just sitting and listening. So that is a strength of this phase and of this model, And another strength of the model is that there's that constant check-in. How are we doing? Through the practice, through the collaboration, and the teacher can adjust that practice piece and collaboration, that phase 2 and 3, as needed. I know personally, I have sometimes let's have students go off and work on collaboration. And as they're collaborating, the teacher is checking in, walking around, asking questions, seeing how they're doing. And the strength of this is if you find a misconception across the board or just very common misconception, you can bring everyone back to phase 2 and do more practice. It's not where once you go on to the next phase, you're past that guidance. You can always bring it back. And even though they might be in phase 2 and 3 of working, practicing with the teacher and collaborating, you still want to start with that phase 1 of the lesson of explicit instruction, even if it's just a snapshot in the very beginning, to review the benchmark, to review what you're doing, to look at your notes, and just quickly take that minute to hit phase 1. You would not just start with everyone go work together collaboratively. You would want to have some sort of quick snapshot as you're moving through the unit of review. So the strength is that there is a lot of support for students and it's flexible as you're moving through a unit and even a daily lesson. You can always bring it back, or if you're practicing, a teacher might have planned to do a lot of teacher guided practice thinking that the students would struggle and realize very quickly, oh, they're ready to go work collaboratively and move on to that next phase. And you can also differentiate in there too. If some students are strong, and I've done this before, some students are strong and ready for that collaboration where they're more independent in practicing, those students can move on, and that's where a teacher can pull a small group and continue in that phase 2 with the small group of practice. So it allows for differentiation and students to have their needs addressed as they're moving through the concept and the skill. Of course, there are weaknesses to the model as well. A weakness could be of the model if a teacher is spending too much time in phase 1 and not pushing the students onto that independent piece, or if a teacher is not using that differentiation that I just mentioned and having all students have to stay on the same page. That could be a weakness. Another weakness is if teachers are not hitting that phase 3 in a structure. When I say collaboration, it does not just mean everyone go work together. There needs to be a structure. It needs to be organized. Everyone needs to know their roles and responsibility. And whatever that group collaboration is, it needs to be where everybody is responsible and everybody is held accountable, not you do this problem and I'll do that problem. That's not collaboration. That's breaking apart the work. So that would be a weakness if it's not followed in that collaborative piece with guidance and with organization, where you could have 1 or 2 students sitting doing nothing while the other students are taking on most of the responsibility. That would not be what gradual release should be doing. There should be a structure within that collaboration. And students also, as they're collaborating, even though the teacher's walking around, a weakness could be if a teacher's not checking in or the students aren't speaking up and they don't understand or are having struggles. There needs to be a way for students to get the teacher's attention, that they know is a safe place. It's okay, come ask questions so that they can move on to success and not just be stuck. I've seen that too, where groups will just sit and struggle and not say anything, or they're practicing incorrectly because the teacher has not checked in to see if there's any misconceptions or if there's anything that needs to be corrected. And then they're practicing incorrectly, and then you have to undo that and before you can move forward, which can be a struggle. So that would be a weakness of the model. And again, going back to the decisions that would be made, which components of the model will be emphasized within a given unit plan. Within the unit, in the beginning of a unit, it would be stronger in that phase 1 of direct teacher explicit direct instruction. And then as you move throughout the unit, that would become very, very shortened, more of just like, let's get everyone together. This is what we're doing. You would still want to have that phase 2 practice piece be very strong in the beginning. There might be very little of phase 3 in the beginning at all. And then as you move throughout the unit, your focus would be on that phase 3 leading up to, are the students ready for that phase 4, which you would have to plan for given that time frame so that they are successful by phase 4. You don't want to be doing phase 1, phase 2. Oh, we don't have time. Let's jump to phase 4. And they haven't had that time to work and practice with their group by themselves. If all they've done is watch the teacher and practice with the teacher, they are not ready for phase 4. So making sure they get lots of practice in phase 3 is an important part of planning for the unit. So that there's lots of independent practice, but within their group where they can talk and grapple with the problem and figure it out for themselves, and know they can ask questions of the teacher as the teacher's circulating. So making sure there's plenty of that phase 3 is very important when planning for the units. And as I said before, in a daily lesson, you do want to hit all of phase 1 and phase 2 in the beginning, maybe a little bit of phase 3 if you feel like they're ready on day 1, maybe to do one problem or, one small piece with a collaborative group and see how they do. But then as you're moving on, you really want to make more room for that phase 3. So that would be the gradual release model and all the phases and how to incorporate it into your daily and unit lesson plans.